Welcome to the Ortho Careers Podcast. My name is Madison, founder of Advanced Scope. This podcast is made for healthcare professionals, both practitioners and leaders, who are seeking to understand how to optimize their career, whether that be work-life balance, salary transparency, or just figuring out how to get from where they're at now to where they want to be. Today's episode, we're talking to Paige Grasso, an experienced surgical PA who is just the most fun. She loves karaoke, and her story is super interesting. She was able to proactively start PA school right after graduation, and she also found her first PA job through walking dogs on the Rover app. So stay tuned to hear about why she chose to specialize right out of PA school and how she's been able to ramp from a very challenging surgical position in abdominal transplant surgery to now being in a seamless role where she's still challenged, but she has great work-life balance. She feels like she is respected and she truly enjoys going to work every day. Stay tuned and thanks for listening. All right, so today we have Paige Grasso here with me. She is an experienced PA. She is in Kansas City, Missouri. So naturally, she is a Chiefs fan. And she went to undergrad, and hopefully I'm pronouncing all this right, at Rockhurst, and went to PA school at UMKC. So she's been in Kansas City. And a fun fact about her would be that she is a karaoke guru, apparently.
Yes, I am.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I'm excited to have you on the podcast today. Obviously, I met Paige about a year ago, and she's somebody that I really admire because I think she is just number one, she's an experienced PA and she's a surgical PA, which I always have high regards for. But she also went into a very specialized specialty or niche, however you want to coin it. And I don't find that many new grads, when they're first starting their career, do this. And so Paige has been doing what she's doing now for about 2.5, 3 years. And I'm excited today to just unwrap kind of what that mindset looked like when she was graduating and choosing a specialty and where to work, but also just talking about PAs in general and the industry and how we can help other people hopefully meet with as much success as she has.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. I'm really excited.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to be on a
Of
podcast. And so getting to do this and then talk about what I love, which is my job.
Yeah,
awesome. Let's
definitely
get into it.
Perfect. Great. Well, I met you, about a year ago now at a PA conference. And I think the best question to open up with today is, what is your go-to karaoke song?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So my go-to song is I Want You Back by the Jackson 5. I don't know what it is about that song, but every time I get up and sing it, it brings the house down.
Yes, that is great.
Oh my gosh, that's such a good one. Growing up, I was classically trained vocally, and I was just I did musicals.
So
I was in choirs. Yes, no, I love it. Like my really good friends who know me well, who have seen me do this, they know that I love to be in front of people on stage.
Awesome.
So if, part of being a PA is that you have to be able to talk to people. Yeah. And so those are all skills that I got from doing things like that earlier in my life. Now, granted, I'm not singing to my patients all the time.
You should.
Has it happened? Yes. But yeah, that would be
that's incredible.
A little about me and karaoke and singing.
Yeah. And I think it's important too, because I think a lot of times we get so tied to our careers, but then before we were a PA, before we were a business owner, before we were these things, like there were pieces of us that we still should enjoy doing. And so I love that you still do karaoke and sing.
Oh my gosh, amongst many other things. And I think that's the beauty of the PA profession is that I have such an amazing work-life balance that work is not my life. It's just something that I do and I actually love doing. Yeah. But I get to hold on to all these other pieces of my life that are really important to me.
Definitely. Yeah. And I know you're lucky because I don't think every PA would say that's true for them, which is why I want to have this podcast, because it helps people get insight into what they can have
Mm-hmm.
and not being afraid to make that jump or to make those changes. So
Sure.
obviously, as you know, I'm a recruiter. I own a recruiting business for PAs, but that's not what this podcast is about. It's really just to shed light and learn about other people in the profession. So awesome. Let's jump into it. I do want to talk a little bit about your journey, how you've gotten to where you're at today. But if you can just give us like a quick introduction as to what specialty you work in, what you do, like your elevator pitch, if you will.
Oh, okay. So I work in abdominal transplant surgery and hepatobiliary surgery. So my guys, they do liver and kidneys, and primarily myself and one other PA, we work on the transplant side.
Gotcha.
Transplant
Okay.
medicine is just so different and unique from anything. And so we also have residents on our service. They primarily will take the hepatobiliary patients. Not to say that I don't. Like today, I was in the OR and we did all hepatobiliary surgery. So we did PD catheter insertions. We did VARDs because someone had necrotizing pancreatitis. I've been in Whipples. Like I've also been in the transplant surgeries too. But because of how specialized the actual practice of medicine is for the transplants, it's better to have the consistency, which is why the PAs run that portion of the service. But the majority of the time, I'm strictly inpatient. So we round on patients every day, pre-round, take consults, admit, discharge, that sort of thing. But then we also get to operate as well.
Very cool. Okay. Yeah. And having that type of a hybrid role is also, I think, good, because sometimes people want only outpatient or only inpatient, or they only want to do OR. And then it's like you sometimes can atrophy on skill sets that you learned or that you might want to bring with you in the future.
Absolutely.
So that's great. Awesome. Okay, great. I don't think I could pronounce that word that you said 3 times fast. So we'll keep it at transplant surgeries. Awesome. Okay, great. So I guess starting from the beginning, right? You were a CNA before becoming a PA. You worked across the board. You were in a med spot at one point. What inspired you to go to school to become a PA? Was it like a certain aha moment when you were working as a CNA? Did you always know you wanted to be one?
So, no. I'm actually one of the only people in my family who is in medicine. I have an uncle who is an ocular plastic surgeon, and I have an aunt who is an injector, which is how I ended up working in a medical spa. But no one else in my family does this. And so when I was in high school, you know, when you grow up thinking about what you're going to do, naturally I thought I would do something my parents did, which is not this. And I went to a high school that they gave us an aptitude test when we were juniors. And most people got like 3 or 4, like, this is what you should major in. I got one thing. And it said diagnostic medicine. Diagnostic medicine. I didn't know what that meant. And so I went to college and kind of thought, well, I don't really want to be a doctor. I don't even know what that means. And so I just started off pursuing a career in nursing. Well, originally I went to the University of Tulsa for a year and I played Division I soccer. That ended up not being
I remember that.
Yeah. And so that ended up not being a very good fit for me. Well, somewhere between when I transferred, my mom, her friends are like family to me. And they kind of sat me down, and they're all in medicine, and they're like, we don't see your personality really fitting into this role of healthcare. Have you ever considered being a PA? And I was like, I don't even know what that is. This was back in like, this was probably in like 2014. Okay. So this was like 10 years ago. And the profession at this point was just up and coming. And so
it wasn't in demand like it is now.
Not even close. And so I looked into what it was. Again, very blessed that we had a ton of people in my life that were like, hey, we know so-and-so, go shadow them, go do this, go do that. And I realized, I was like, yeah, this is a profession I could totally see myself doing. And I just kind of decided, all right, I'm going to change my major. I'm going to go all in on this. And so those people that are listening to this that have either been through PA school or are looking into doing this, you know that there are a lot of programs out there that require what's called direct patient care hours. There's very certain things that will qualify for that. At the college that I went to, which was Rockhurst, at the time, I was kind of the first person to be going through this process, attempting to apply and get in straight out of school. A lot of people back then, it was more common for this to be a second career choice. Or they would have
to do like a gap year, right?
Yes,
like
or you would have to
finish
work.
school,
Yeah.
do your clinical hours or your pre-PA hours and then go to school.
So I did all this research on my own, thanks to like places like Reddit. And I basically figured out what I needed to do. I got my CNA license while I was in college. I got all my patient care hours done, and then I went straight out. I graduated and started school 6 months later.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so it's an interesting journey, and I remember being a CNA, and I worked first in skilled nursing facilities. And if anyone knows anything about those, I don't want to, it's a hard place to describe. You're working with people that this is where they're probably spending the remainder of their lives. It was very humbling. I was taking care of patients that were actively dying. And those patients changed me, and I would like to think for the better. There's several of them that I still remember, and like they're the reason why I was like, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do. Because healthcare is a profession that's primarily built on giving.
Yeah,
that's what it is. Every single member is giving something. Like my transplant surgeons, they'll go. Yeah. They don't sleep sometimes because they're transplanting organs or saving somebody. And so but that was something that really attracted me to it. And so while being a CNA I looked at it as a stepping stone. I learned so much from that. And so I know that like this is supposed to be kind of an episode for people who are looking into this profession, but all of the stepping stones you take to get where you're going, you can learn something from it. And you should. 100%, you should let it shape you, because it's only going to help you.
Yeah. Well, and I think the key thing, similar to you, I was never a CNA or in a clinical position, but my grandma had Alzheimer's and dementia, and I volunteered in school because I was an undergrad in health sciences. I thought I'd be going to graduate school and then fell into the world of healthcare recruiting. But at the time I was volunteering and working at a dementia care unit, and same thing, just the amount of empathy that the providers needed to have with these patients that one day could be 100% and the next morning they are screaming from their bedroom because they don't know where they are and they need help. And it's just, it's true. And then you go there the next day and it's like, so-and-so passed away last night, and that's not uncommon. And I think having that empathy as a provider is so key in any specialty that you go to, because there's a lot of healthcare providers that don't have that. They don't have that bedside manner. They don't have that level of passion really in that they care about the quality of care they're giving. So I think that's super, super important. But awesome. Okay. I love that you kind of had an untraditional and also very proactive jump into being a PA. And I think that could be helpful for people that are listening who might be exploring it and wondering how they can get ahead so that they can do the same thing.
Yeah. So I think it's always just about, how can you get yourself forward? And if you're unsure about the profession, go shadow somebody.
Yes.
I have 100%. People shadow me all the time. Sometimes I don't know why, but I'm like, at least we'll have fun. So
yeah, for sure. Awesome. Okay, great. And so I want to get into the thick of this because I think the biggest takeaway, as I mentioned before, is you went into something that is super specialized, like something that I don't think a lot of people even probably know is something that they can get into as a new grad, or that they know that they could transfer into as an experienced PA. So I'd love to hear, when you graduated school, number one, like how did you come about this opportunity where you've been? Because you've been there since you graduated, correct?
Yeah. Which is very uncommon.
So you clearly liked it. Yeah,
Which is very uncommon. Usually most PAs will work somewhere, or most people work somewhere for a year and then they change. I've never left this job. So
right, which says a lot, right? About not only what you're doing and the impact, but also about you. So I'd love to hear, because I think what I hear from new grads the most when I am presenting a specialty, and as a recruiting group, we specialize mainly in orthopedics, right? So we
Sure.
might be presenting an opportunity to somebody for neurosurgery, for, working with a spine doc, or they're working with, an orthopedic doc, and they're going to be in a very surgical position and they kind of shy away from it, right? And they're like, well, I don't know that I want to get into that, right? I want to start in something a little bit more general where I don't pigeonhole myself. And I completely disagree with this statement. And I think that you do too. And I'd love to hear your take on like what made you go that route. And do you think it was the right decision to specialize early on?
Yeah. So one thing you kind of have to understand about how I came about this job was that I was in PA school during COVID. So I finished.
Yikes. Okay.
And so when I was at UMKC, the way that they do their program is it starts in January and it's 2.5 years.
Okay.
So my first calendar year was 2019. So I completed that whole year. That was all of our didactic work. The next calendar year was 2020. COVID happened in March of 2020. So I finished my didactics remotely. Like we had like a month and a half left.
Wow.
I moved back to St. Louis where my family was because that's a whole nother story. But anyways, I was there doing it. And then we came back and I was able to finish out my clinical year. And so truly for where things were at, I still ended up okay because I still got everything done I needed to do, passed boards, all that kind of thing. Well, going into PA school, I never had an idea of this is what I'm doing and this is why I'm here. I had some ideas of different specialties I might want to do, but I always knew I wanted to do a specialty because I like to be challenged and I like to learn.
Yeah.
And you learn that through going through your clinical rotations. Like I had some friends that were like thinking they were going to do one thing and then they fell in love with primary care. I mean, that's just how this journey goes. You have to stay open-minded because you will inevitably get proven wrong every single time. And so
yes, it's so true. I talk to people and like sometimes they know from the start, like I want, dermatology. And I understand, I guess a lot of people
everyone
have
wants derm.
roles.
Everybody wants derm.
Everybody.
Yeah. And you know what? Dermatology is an awesome specialty. I love it.
I it's difficult because personally for me, I'm like the whole med spa thing with like injections. I get it. But like you said, then you look at specialties like what you're doing or neurosurgery or cardio, and I'm like, I don't know that I would go into that, but I don't want to insult people. But if I was smart enough to be a PA, I feel like, I don't know.
Well, it all comes down to lifestyle choices too.
Yes.
But anyways, so while I was in my clinical rotations, I was dog sitting through an app called Rover. And
I've heard of it.
Yes. And I had in my bio that I was a PA student. And so I was getting hired by all these medical people because if you know that, oh my gosh, this girl, she's got her shit together, and she's going to take care of my dog. And it was great for me because then I'd have somewhere quiet to go study. Well, like the second or third person I dog sat for ended up being a PA at the hospital that I work at now. And I walked in to meet her and we got to talking. And then 5 minutes into the conversation, she was like, "Are you looking for a job?" And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, what specialty are you in? And she said interventional radiology. And at the time, that's what I wanted to do. And I was like, this is divine intervention. Well, I ended up interviewing for this job and I didn't get it. But I interviewed well enough to where they said, "Hey, we have this other position that's opening up. It's going to fit your time frame more when you take your boards. It's abdominal transplant." And I was like, I'll go interview. Why not? And then they ended up offering me the job. And in my mind, I'm sitting here thinking, well, I was the first person in my class to get a job. It was really early on, but I also knew I was like, this is COVID. Jobs are short. I'm going to take what I get. Like, I'm not going to be picky. And I wanted to stay in Kansas City. And so I felt like I was like, I'm just going to take this job. We'll see what happens. And it was great because I took my boards and I had several months off before I started, which at the time I thought was terrible. But in hindsight, I'm so glad I got that time off because I had basically gone literally my entire life in school. Like I never had a break. So if you graduate and you end up having time in between school and starting your job, just enjoy it. Exactly. You don't get that time back.
I tell
just
people
because
they're like, oh, can I start earlier? I'm like,
if you get time off, yes.
Go do something that you won't be able to do because, you know, once you're in it, you're in it. And, you know, you can always take a sabbatical. You can always do things, but you're never going to get the time back to where you're not having to go back to thinking about it or in the back of your mind thinking about it.
Oh, yeah. And so I started this job and to be completely transparent, for the first, I don't know, probably year that I worked there, I really struggled. It was not easy. It's a specialty, and it took a lot of humbling for me to realize I have a lot to learn and I need to be receptive. I need to be open to that. I think that's something that people of my generation are not very good at. I had thought I was good at it until I got into this, and I was like, oh, wow. Like, the reason why this is difficult is because I don't understand everything that's going on. I don't know all of this because the surgeons I'm working with went to residency, fellowships, sometimes 2 fellowships. And so I was incredibly, incredibly blessed that I was working with another PA who had several years of experience, and I learned so much from her. She's one of my closest friends. I was just going to
ask you that.
She's one of my closest friends now.
I was going to ask you that. Yeah.
So having her as a mentor was the biggest blessing. And it's even better that I get to consider her a friend. I truly believe the reason why I've stayed in this job is because I genuinely love the surgeons I work for. I love them and I love her. And we have a great team. And like, that's incredible. Is every day rainbows and butterflies? No. But I work for a great hospital that treats us really well. And I learn something new every day. And so
that's awesome.
The thing about working in a niche specialty is people think that closes you off. I say no, because it's all in how you sell yourself. You have to think about this.
Right.
Think about it like this. So I work in a really, really highly acute specialty. Well, you sell your skill set. I have a skill set that I've learned from this, of working with really sick patients, of, I came in and didn't know anything and I learned it. And now if I would ever choose to go into another job, into another specialty, will there be a learning curve? Absolutely. But I'll pick it up faster just because of already being in this. I already know how to be a PA and how to do all these little things I didn't know before. And so I think being in a niche specialty, especially a surgical specialty, it can only improve you, and it can make you more of an asset, because you're going to have a skill set that nobody else is really going to have.
100%. And I think too that when you talk to people and they say, well, if I go specialize, let's say it's in what you're doing, then what happens when I want to change specialties, or if I want to, right? Because that's the beauty of being a PA, is that you don't just have to go into one and stay there for the remainder of your career. But I think there's also something to be said for the edge that comes with, I am working in this extremely niche role. And like you said, you're also working, because I was going to ask you, were you the only PA at first? Was there a huge ramp period? And I want to talk about that next. But, niching down to something to where you now can almost, like you're saying, sell yourself, brand yourself as being somebody that has done really challenging things, and you've done it well, even though it was hard, right?
It's still hard.
Now,
it's still hard.
But now every time that even if you, in the future wanted to change specialties, you wouldn't be afraid of anything, because you'd be like, well, I did that and I knew nothing about it. Right. And now I have all of this knowledge and all of these skill sets, and I can just transfer them and apply them into this other specialty. So I think that's huge mindset wise.
And the other thing too, is that what I've learned just from having conversations with people about other jobs. First of all, if they have you in a room to interview, you're already qualified. They're just looking at if they think you're going to be the most compatible candidate for their practice. So at that point, they're looking at your personality, and they're looking at, do I like this person? Can I work with this person every day? Is he or she going to be someone who as a team player, or maybe you're interviewing with a surgeon who you're only working with them. And so a lot of times, like once you get to the interview stage, they're just looking at you as a person, not necessarily like the skill set or your education or
the resume. Right.
The resume is just getting you through the door.
Yes.
And so it really kind of can come down to that. And I think that's another great thing about surgery is if you're able to work with surgeons and with a surgical team, that just that in and of itself says a lot about who you are and what you can
your
do.
Grit, right? Because I think, it's true. And sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not, right? Like I won't speak out of terms because there's a lot of surgeons that aren't this way, but there's a lot of surgeons that, they're surgeons, right? They've got a healthy ego attached to them, and that's okay. But if you're working on a team with people, you have to be able to kind of handle that, right? And hold your own and be confident in what you bring to the table and the value that you bring. Because when you're interviewing, the last thing you want is to join a job where you feel like the surgeon is not seeing you as an equal part to the value in what you're doing for the patient.
And I think that's where PAs have struggled to be understood. I find that a lot of the younger surgeons, all the residents I work with, they understand how PAs can and should be utilized. And that there is a difference between a physician assistant and a resident or a fellow. The surgeons I work with have been nothing but respectful to me.
That's awesome.
They're great.
I was going to ask you about that because I think you see a lot of new grads because some practices, unfortunately, they will hire new grads because they think they're just going to get an assistant out of them. And they see it as that relationship. And it's like, oh, no. Like that's not how this collaboration works. And so when you all work in tandem together to bring out the most important thing, which is the patient outcomes and helping people, is being able to collaborate. And so I think, that was why I said I wanted to touch upon that with the fact that you had really strong collaborating docs and also another PA there that made it easy for you to come in, even if it was challenging, even if you didn't know anything. And I tell people that all the time when I'm talking to them, I'm like, don't pick just a job, pick people that you're going to work with and enjoy, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what specialty you're in. If the collaborating surgeon doesn't respect your profession as a whole, your next year is going to be miserable, right?
Oh, yeah.
Or if you're the only PA in there and I even heard of places where it's like they're not even going to have support throughout the day, right? Like in urgent care places. And it's like, I just don't recommend it. You want to learn. You want to have a place where even 2-3 years in, you still feel like you're being challenged, because then it's like you don't want to get bored either. So I think that's tremendous. Awesome. Okay. So in kind of closing things out here, what would be your best advice to somebody that is just now getting into the profession and maybe struggling with that question of, do I keep it broad and not pigeonhole myself, or do I take the leap, take the challenge, and get into something that is maybe really, really hard at first?
Well, and this is going to be a biased answer because this is me. But sure. I always knew, and my dad is like my hero and my best friend. And so him and I would talk at lengths about what we thought I was going to do. And he wouldn't tell me. He's like, I'm not going to influence your decisions. But I always told him was, I said, I want to do something that nobody else is doing. I don't know what that is, but I said, I was like, I know that I'll get those opportunities. But I didn't want to make the mistake of writing something off just because it wasn't what I thought I wanted. And so that was why when I was looking for jobs and things, which I really didn't even look, it just kind of happened.
Which is like the best story ever.
Oh my gosh, Madison, if you just spend like more time with me, you'll learn that this is just how my life is. This is literally my entire life. And I've learned really early on that if I would close myself off from opportunities, whether it's jobs, friendships, relationships, whatever you want to call it, you're honestly
getting on podcasts with people you met once.
Yes. You're gonna miss out on things because you excluded things that you didn't even know were a possibility.
Right.
And so what I would encourage any new grad to do would be to keep your eyes open and don't say no to something just because you don't know what it is or you don't understand. And I would say just extend that out to everything in your life. But I think the best opportunities that come to us are the ones we never saw coming. And so if you end up doing general practice, great. Take what you can learn while you're there. No one stays in the same job forever, but you can learn something from everywhere you're at. If you end up in a niche specialty initially and that's what you're getting offered, take it. Spend a year there. Learn what you can. Then you leave and you go somewhere else. And it's just all kind of about being like a sponge. Just learn as much as you can
100%.
because that's what this profession is built on. This profession is built for people who are versatile.
Yes.
When I think of the one word that describes a PA, it's versatility. Because you have to be able to adapt to anything. You have to be able to communicate. Like 90% of my job is communicating with the rest of the hospital and forming relationships with people. You wouldn't think that because it's medicine, but when you're on an inpatient service, you need to get things done, and you do that by forming relationships with people. So I think,
and I would also argue too that, I mean, you think about just the future of healthcare, right? And like you're saying, a lot of the younger docs have worked with PAs from the start, so they understand their role in the healthcare ecosystem and how valuable and important it is. And I think there's still a lot of advocacy that needs to happen when you think about like the autonomy that NPs have in comparison to PAs, and we won't get into all of that. But I think there's still a lot that can happen for PAs that they are 100% capable of and should have the same level of autonomy and rights. But with all that being said, I think also around the mindset that you're talking about is the confidence. When you stay open-minded and you say, like, no matter what I'm going into, there is going to be a learning curve. Now, how steep that learning curve looks like, it might be a little bit higher for something that's more niche or specialized, but then think about also how much more you're going to grow as a clinician, as a provider, when that bell curve is higher, right? And so I think you're a perfect example of that. And now, 3 years in, looking at your career and being able to say you overcame that, right? And now it's only up. So that's fantastic. Awesome. Cool. Well, I've enjoyed speaking with you, Paige. And as always, we have great conversations about all of this. And, I think this will definitely serve as a great way to influence both new grads and maybe people that are looking at switching specialties too, who feel like they've been in one forever. And maybe they're just looking for that sign to make that jump to move into something that they might have a little bit of interest in. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Of course. Happy to be here.
Yes. And next time we'll have to have you sing some Michael Jackson or Jackson 5 for us.
I would love to. Hopefully I'm a little stuffed up right now, so it'll sound a lot better.
We won't put you on the spot.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Ortho Careers. Again, my name is Madison, owner and founder of Advanced Scope. If you are looking for a job or feel like it might be time to accomplish some of the things you heard that Paige has in her career, feel free to reach out to me, or you can check out our website if you're just a little bit curious at www.advancedscopetalent.com. Thanks so much, and I hope you have a great day.